2020, 6 p.m. Call the meeting to order. This meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. And we have the entire committee here this evening. And I will give an opportunity for folks to make any committee or subcommittee communications at this time. And just for those out there in the general public, we will have an opportunity for folks to raise their hand and make a brief statement. Then we will close that opportunity for public statements, and then we will begin our discussion on a reopening plan after that. Okay? Does anybody have any communications they'd like to start with from the committee?
I have just one. It's echoing still pretty badly.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Just to, again, thank the families who reached out and the educators who reached out since the last meeting. I think we had some really great discussion, and I know that many of the questions that we brought up last time are being addressed either by documents that we've received or our discussion tonight, as well as individuals who are present in the audience to speak to us. I also just want to clarify, I know there was a few questions regarding my vote of a no on the calendar, and that wasn't a no to professional development. That was just stating my no, that how I had previously voted the first time on the calendar. So I am not against professional development for educators. I think that this is the exact time that we need additional professional development and collaboration for educators. And it's just reiterating what my vote was previous. So just want to make sure that that is out there for everyone to hear and to clarify why I issued that actual vote of no.
Greg, I've got one quick comment.
Go ahead,
as
Bill.
I told everybody in January when we were still meeting in person, Andy Churchill, the former executive director of the Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative, left in the middle of January, and we began a robust search that was kind of sidetracked a little bit by the fact that COVID shut everything down. And I am pleased to announce that in June, we offered the position to Roland Joyle, who was an assistant superintendent in the Chicopee school system, and he accepted, and we successfully negotiated a contract, and he began in that position on July 1st. I failed to mention that in our previous meetings, and it dawned on me that I did not inform the committee, and I apologize for that.
Okay, thank you for that update. That's good to hear that they'll be fully staffed and up and running. Anyone else? Go ahead.
And we are going to be meeting, and the board of directors will meet next week to discuss what their plan will be for reentry as we enter into the fall school season.
Okay, excellent. Okay, at this point, we will open it up for public comment. If you are in the audience and you'd like to make a brief statement, you certainly can do that. If you'd like to raise your hand, we will call on you, and if you can just let us know your name and address for the record. And there is that opportunity for visitors to make a comment. Then we will close that opportunity and then begin our discussion amongst the committee for the reopening plan. So is anyone out in the audience looking to speak tonight? Got a couple out there, Don. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi. Law, 22 Sanford Street. Sorry, the echo.
Yeah, it's a bit echoey. If you can just do your best, we'd appreciate it. Thanks. Go ahead.
I have two sons, one entering 7th and one entering 10th, and I just first want to say thank you to all of you. There's no words to express what you're doing for all of our kids, and you're truly appreciated. I attended Monday night's meeting, and I've read through the plan, and I don't see anything regarding the high school students that are either starting or continuing to split their time between East Longmeadow High School and CTEC. And I was just wondering if there was any information regarding that program.
Are we going to address that, Gordon or Heather, as we go forward?
So, hello, Mrs. Law. Thank you for being here. CTEC is looking to see how all the 7 member districts are going to ultimately set up, if they're going into a hybrid look or a remote look, or if they're fully in person. And they're also probably, but I don't think they voted on this, because the collaborative does have their own board, and it's made up of members. Mr. Fonseca actually is the chair of that board. It's made of members from the 7 districts, the 7 school committees of the 7 districts. And they're looking to see how they're going to be able to best support the schools. I know that they're at least looking at the same type of plans. You know, would they be able to offer something that is 5 days a week? What does that look like? But then they're also looking at how they would possibly operate in a hybrid. And I don't know, Mr. Fonseca, if they're looking at fully remote as well. That's a little bit more challenging when you're talking about hands-on classes.
I have been in contact, and Roland Joyle has been calling me. The 2 options I think that are going to be looked at for CTEC will be both the hybrid and remote. And they're still working with Don Jarvis, who is the principal of Career Tech, on how that might look. And as I said, there will be a presentation. We're meeting next Wednesday night to decide on how the collaborative is going to open in the fall, and all 7 member districts will be participating in that meeting, and I'm sure it will be a fruitful discussion on what is in the best interest of all the students.
Thank you.
Greg, you're muted.
Yep, thanks. Hey, Steve.
Hey, how are you guys?
Doing well. How's it going?
Good. I apologize. I would have normally cleaned up a little bit more for the committee, but I just got power back about 2 hours ago. So I'm
Nice.
looking a little rough here. Sorry about that. I just wanted to just put in one thing that I know that you guys will consider, but I wanted to make sure that it was on the record and your deliberations tonight. After listening to the last meeting, after going through a bunch of these plans from a bunch of different districts, the one that I work for, one's where I saw other people, this one obviously where my children go to school, I think the 2 most important things for us to keep in mind are safety and equity. And the more that I heard last time about, to me, there are clear safety issues, regardless of whether you were looking at a full in-person model or a hybrid model. There are exposure potentials there in both of those. And the more that I heard about the hybrid model last time, particularly at the high school where I have a student starting in the fall, the idea that high school students who are not being offered busing by the district, which would force the hands of many high school parents, me included, to have my kids go remote, whether that was my choice or not. The fact that they'd be going through this edgenuity and not really even having a quote East Longmeadow High School experience, certainly not the kind that their peers were having who were there in the building, I think are on some sort of a hybrid model. I think in addition to safety, which is sort of priority A, I think 1A has to be equity. And I think that although none of these solutions are what we would like, and we are all acknowledging that, we would all like to be back full time, but it simply is not safe to do it right now. And to me, looking at those choices, the most equitable of those, with obviously looking at the most equitable, has to be the remote option. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, for your input. Just for some further knowledge, that it has been a concern by a lot of folks, and we have addressed it to some extent, that being the opt-out option. If we do go hybrid, we'll go into that a little bit further discussion. But again, Steve, thank you for your input. Okay, is there anyone else out there in the audience who would like to speak? If so, if you could raise your hand, please, and this will be the final call for that. Hello, Kate, are you there?
Yep, sorry, just quick a couple things. My name's Kate Dugan. I live at 9 Shaw Street. I spoke last time, but I'll just say a few more things. One is I'm curious. I want to think very carefully, or hear you all think very carefully about the inevitability of closure. What is that point? I know I, as an educator, would like to take the word pivot out of my language forever. And I imagine many of you would too. And one way to do that would be simply to start fully remote. I've also been thinking a lot about the stress for our students and for our staff and for our families. My daughter and I ride our bikes over at Maple Shade, and so we've seen the increasing number of dots, which apparently are to indicate where students stand. It just seems very stressful. And remote brings its own stress, for sure. But it's a different kind of stress that feels slightly more manageable than dots on a playground. And then the last thing I was thinking about is the capacity of East Longmeadow teachers. Look, when I moved here from Chicago, I visited 10 different districts, and I could live anywhere. I'm a professor at Springfield College. It didn't matter where I lived. And I chose to live in East Longmeadow because of the quality of our schools and our teachers and the support that our staff gives to our students. I know that they can do a good job when supported fully remote. So I would really like to see the committee make that decision. So thanks for taking the time to listen and doing all of this hard decision making.
Okay, Kate, thank you again for your input. Appreciate it. We will have some of our town health experts who may address some of those benchmarks, for lack of a better term, and we'll discuss those a little bit later. Any other folks in the audience who would like to speak? This would be your final option to do so tonight. Hi, Susie.
Hi. Oop, why is my camera not on? Sorry. Thank you, everybody. Suzanne Guile, 22 Bain Street, East Longmeadow. I'd sent a letter to most of you. Some of them got kicked back, so I don't know if everyone actually received the email. One of my questions compared to listening to what other districts are doing, I was wondering why in our hybrid model, we were not looking at a kind of Zoom and room kind of approach where when the students are home, that they are zoomed in or Google Meeted into the actual lesson, at least for the mini lesson, so that the pacing is addressed and there's less of an issue with kind of keeping up with the material if they're actually in the classroom every single day with their peers, whether it's through physically in the room or through a virtual model. And I didn't hear anything mentioned about even entertaining that idea on Monday, and so I just didn't know if that was even an option.
Yeah, Susie, we have had discussion about it. We've come to somewhat of a idea that it's not an option. I don't know, Gordon, if you want to address that now or later on, or.
Sure. So one of the elements that makes that challenging is that we're going to be utilizing all of our computers across the district. And to do something like that, we would also have to have some type of other device, whether it be a camera or another computer, to live stream it. I think one of the other challenges with something like that is that your teacher is focusing in on the students in front of him or her and working the lesson and sort of managing the class there. I think you're going to, no matter how skilled, and I think our staff is incredibly skilled, we're going to be doing a disservice to something that is simply streaming. The most they might get out of that is the audio and so forth. But it is something, as Mr. Thompson said, that has been in the discussions. And so we're certainly looking at how to make those off cohort days as robust as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Susie. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Anyone else in the audience who would like to raise their hand to speak? And again, this will be the only opportunity tonight for the public to speak. Okay. Seeing none, we're going to close that portion of the agenda this evening. And we will move on to our main topic of discussion tonight, item 4.1.1, discussion of East Longmeadow Public Schools reopening for the 2020-2021 school year. Perhaps, Gordon, we could start with some of the discussion we've had or some modifications that we've since the last meeting. We had a vibrant discussion at our last meeting. a lot of concerns and questions. Some of those have been answered and some things have been modified to reflect those. Do you want to kind of go through, I think mostly it would be, mostly in regards to the hybrid model. Some of those things.
So if you, I think Mrs. Brown has the opportunity to share a screen. Do you want to bring up the plan? So first of all, the link to this plan, and it's a continuously evolving plan, we'll continue to add to it so parents can see it as we work with not only on our district groups, but also each building has an instructional planning group. And just to give you an idea of how the plan works, you can, in the table of contents, each of these blue areas link to that section of the plan. Some of the areas certainly that we look to add between Monday night's meeting and this meeting is we'll take in a moment to some of the schedules that whether it be a hybrid schedule or a fully remote schedule that we built in there. But we certainly did listen to not only the public comment, but the discussion and comments and feedback as we were going through this with the entire school committee. So in the plan, we've added the element, sorry, we're making you dizzy here a little bit. We've added not a description. If Heather, if you can stop it on further up. Just go to the learning, the protocols, health and safety. Thank you. So one of the things that we know and have discussed with some individuals you'll hear from this evening, our ELPS school physician, Dr. Clark, our East Long Meadow Director of Health, Amy Petrosky, and our nurse leader, Kelly LeVombard. We've had multiple meetings with them. They also are on our operations planning group. They have continued to help us revise these health and safety protocols that we know are going to be needed to mitigate the risks and make sure that we put our students and staff in the safest possible conditions. And so one of the things that we had talked about right here in the middle of the page was masks. And in further discussions with all of them and with some members of our school committee, if we go into a hybrid model where obviously we have in-person on various days, masks are going to be mandatory for all staff and students. And so this is where we talked a little bit on Monday about just asking our families, and I'm sure that they're already doing this with the mask orders going on in the state of Massachusetts, just working with their students on proper protocol for putting on and taking off a mask. We talked about mask breaks, but we knew that they are already mandatory for anyone riding a bus. After numerous discussions this week, we think it's probably best if we're putting all these strategies, hand hygiene, masks, and distancing to make sure that we're in the safest possible condition, that we do mandate that for all students. If you want to scroll down to the next page. One more page. The other thing that we really focused in on is at the bottom of this page, and we talked about how this is going to be, and I think Mr. Vigno hit it when he talked about just safety's got to be the top priority. We really have to, if we're entertaining any in-person learning, we all have to make sure that we're monitoring ourselves first for these symptoms, and then certainly our children as we get them ready for school. It's going to be very important, and we'll certainly not only have this in the document, but we'll have this around the school, and we'll be communicating it around the schools, communicating it consistently, just so everybody is aware of what the symptoms might be. But probably the bottom line, more importantly, because this is not sort of, at least from my understanding sort of the American culture, if we're not feeling well, stay home, even if it's not COVID related. You know, we're all used to sort of powering through colds and illness in general, and certainly is laudable, but what the experts in public health are telling us, we can't do that anymore. So no matter what, if you're not feeling well, stay home. And then, so certainly that's going to be something that we have to be very cognizant of at schools, because attendance has always been sort of the other way, that we're looking to get you in as often as possible. But this is something that we need to continue to take into account. As we go further down, just wanted to highlight quickly, we talked about this, but we did add in here, you know, what in the months of June and July, our principals and assistant principals and custodians were going through as they looked at the 3 models that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education were looking for. But knowing that we have to put these safety protocols in place. So we added, after Monday's discussion, just a little bit more detail as we were looking at in-person and measuring this out and putting 6 feet between desks, where and how we got to certain numbers, where if you go down to the bottom of this paragraph, it talks about that on average our classrooms, when you go to 6 feet apart, average about 10 to 12 desks. In some places, in a few of our schools, you might have a classroom that can actually accommodate at 6 feet distance, 15 desks. So that does force you into looking at how you reduce your enrollment on a given day, which is where we started our discussion on Monday around the hybrid model. But wanted to make sure that everybody was aware and that we're capturing the long, many weeks of work that has been put into putting this plan together. Then one of the things that we tell you, can stay there, Heather. This is more verbal. The discussion earlier in the week around the opt-out, should parents choose or families choose to opt out of, if the school committee decides we're going to start with a hybrid model. We took that to heart, and between Tuesday and today, our staff and our planning groups have been working incredibly hard. They've been working hard prior to that, but they are starting to look at how we break down the idea of, okay, they're opting out, we may be in a hybrid. How do we keep students better coordinated and connected to the schools? And we did say this, but I want to reiterate that if students do opt out and we end up starting in a hybrid, we will be making sure that we have educators assigned to those students. And we think at the elementary level, depending on the percentages, and one of the things that we saw, although it's not a binding survey, is that we were at about 18 to 20% of parents thinking about opting out their students if we were to start in a hybrid model. It may end up where we will be able to dedicate, a core classroom teacher to a group of students in our elementary schools, or a combination of a teacher and a few other staff members, if it's not a core homeroom teacher, to work with those individuals and make sure that we are keeping it coordinated with what the in-person learning may be going on for the cohorts who are coming in during the hybrid, and which should make it easier for people to transition back and forth. And that certainly was a concern and questions that were asked on Monday, and our buildings in their planning teams are looking at how they do that and how we do that well. At the secondary level, we still may use Edgenuity, but if we take the high school, for instance, what they're going to do is start to look at, so what is the robust curriculum in Edgenuity, and how does it compare to our courses, and how do we, again, make those bridges so that we can, or develop those bridges so that we can make it easier for students to transition, say, from opt-out back into a more traditional program, or vice versa. Because that is something that we want to offer our families, because we know that these decisions are challenging. And we also know that the information we're receiving changes on a daily basis. And so we're going to be building how we can do that better. And certainly anyone who at the secondary level, again, is opting to move into a more remote program, even though we might be at the district working on a hybrid program, we will assign educators there, and we will have check-ins, to start the day, and we will be able to coordinate how that stays connected to things that are going on in, say, similar classes. Just to give you an example, if you had a 9th grader in a geometry class, that 9th grader would still be able to connect with our teachers who will be teaching geometry in scheduled extra help sessions and so forth. And so we will outline how that can be more connected and more coordinated. And so we wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that, school committee, and certainly all of our families. In terms of other changes, I don't know, Mr. Thompson, if you want to go to schedules first, or if you wanted to talk about, since we're just into the models and we're talking about some of the health and safety protocols. You want me to keep going with this, or?
Could we touch on the schedules for
Sure.
the fully remote?
So we'll show the handy dandy linking feature. Might as well show it off. So if you go online and you go to the link for this plan, and then you get to the table of contents, just click on schedules, and there are links to all the schedules that we're building. Certainly in the last 2 days, there's been a fury of work to really define this, and it will be defined further. But these schedules here will give you an idea of what's going to happen on the in-person day. This, I believe, is Mapleshade, where cohort, I think I was referring to it as cohort A, they refer to it as cohort 1. We'll make sure that we make that more uniform. And it gives you an idea of what they're doing during the day in person. So you're starting out as they normally would in homeroom, attendance being taken and so forth. And then you're setting up your day and going through your literacy block, where movement and mask breaks will happen, when your math block happens, how lunch, and all these elements, especially arrival, lunch, recess, all the above. And certainly we're not excited about putting those dots that one of the parents mentioned, but all these different pieces will have new processes and protocols to them, and those are being developed as we speak. So this gives you, any one of these links will give you an idea of what it looks like in terms of the full week for the hybrid. It also will give you an idea, if we scroll down more, those are all 3 grade levels there. It breaks down the remote day focus as well. And so give parents a better idea of what that all looks like and when things are happening, and where the learning focus is. If you stop right there just for a moment. This is one of the things that we highlighted, and certainly a visual is far better. I think it's equal to 1,000 words. And one of the things that we want to do and we want to provide is this parent communication and outreach. So we're building these into our schedules at the buildings so that we can have that and we can connect with families and make sure that we're answering questions and we're responding to needs. That's going to be the best way that we get through this, is if we have that open communication. so that we can respond. And I think one of the parents said that she would like to get pivot out of her vocabulary, and I do understand that. So I'll just use nimble, that we know we need to be nimble and respond to certain things rather quickly. That's how this planning has worked all summer. Heather, if you can just scroll. And Heather, please jump in. And
Sure.
I know you,
Maple Shade also created what an at-home learning day could look like in terms of providing assignments to students. And that could also be a flipped classroom video. It could be some other video so that the students also get a little bit more direct instruction, as well as working on their assignments, but also time to work with a dedicated educator who will have a cohort of students that will schedule small group support time with them as well and be available for individual as well. One thing that's not on this schedule, but it's on some others, is what the fully remote would look like. And obviously we would try to make that remote look as similar to a regular school day as possible, while also honoring the fact that, having those breaks in place so that kids are not constantly on screen.
actually, if you want to go to one of the other links, we can show them.
Sure.
You know what? Let's go to a secondary school so they can see that. And we encourage everyone to get online and see this and ask questions, because that's how we put the best program forward. But this, so this is Birchland Parks. They're going to run their, what their students' schedule looks like as they print these. They're going to run, if we're in the hybrid model, that schedule on a Wednesday, and they're going to be hitting, basically the times that we generally hit were we in person. And they still will continue to offer their tutorial, which is a scheduled block when students are in school in person, and it covers a lot of different things of value that we can get at during that block, as well as they are going to offer on that Wednesday the teacher office hours. And this would be, certainly I was talking earlier in terms of one of the revisions, if you have a child or a family has decided to opt out when we're running the hybrid, certainly those students can connect with teachers to get extra help and answer questions and just keep focused on certain things. And so this is something that all teachers with the Wednesday schedule and the hybrid are going to be providing on that day. And then if you scroll down, I think just a little bit further.
I just wanted to explain why there's no advisory in this. The cohorts will be so small. They're about 12 students. So they'll be maintaining those relationships. But in the remote schedule, they have built in that advisory because obviously they'll be remote every day.
So, and then this would be obviously repeated 5 days a week for the for students. And so they would have their advisory, they would have their 6 blocks moving into then tutorial and then the teacher office hours.
Can you, sorry, I know it's hard with the muting and the unmuting. Can you clarify one thing on the Birchland Park schedule, just since it's up now?
Sure.
So when we see like the block 1 from 8:05 to 8:50, because I know we've mentioned it a couple times over the course of these conversations that students wouldn't be on from, let's say, 8:05 to 1:15. So as part of that time from the 8:05 to 8:50 reserved for direct instruction from the educator, and part of that considered independent work time? And is that true for all the blocks, especially in a remote only setting?
Yeah, so if we go to a full remote, they're going to run their schedule as though we were almost in person. Obviously, there will be changes in how you go about a given block and what you're teaching. But basically, if that block for Gordon Smith, 7th grader, is block 1 is their the English course, that's live teaching connection with the English teacher and going through their regular schedule.
We're also providing professional development in the beginning of the year on some remote learning tools. So teachers will have the ability to learn how to, for example, conference remotely when they have a whole class of kids utilizing breakout rooms, and NetTop. Google Docs has a lot of features where you can have, ongoing back and forth, math space, Equatio. So really utilizing those tools so that there's direct instruction, but also collaborative learning and individual support.
I don't know if you want to show the high school.
High school is very similar. We can, but it's the same idea that they're going to have the remote day is very, very close to a regular school day. So here's their Wednesday, but it will be the same for a regular school day.
And I think, Ms. Trulio, to your question, so obviously whatever the student has selected that falls into that A block, that would then be what's printed for that student. And so on Wednesdays in the hybrid model, that's when that class would meet. And then as we go through to, can you scroll down to the full week if we were in a fully remote model? Then, they would set up the schedule for the entire week and what it would look like and what people can expect.
So we will continue the block scheduling with that. So they'll have 4 classes one semester and 4 the other.
Correct.
In hopes
Yeah.
that maybe we could actually make it into a school. Great. Okay.
So the block scheduling also gives us some opportunity. It's challenging at the secondary level to try to limit the cohorts, but this gives you fewer passing times. That's something that we know we want to manage and manage well. And so this is why we've moved. And I think many high schools in at least the LPVC, in talking with the superintendents, seem to be going, if they were sort of a combination block and so forth, they seem to be moving this year to a block to minimize that the amount of passing that a student has on any given day.
Okay, I think that's a good synopsis of the scheduling. I'm encouraged to see that either way, our students will be on a schedule more so than last spring. I think that will be advantageous to their learning and keeping students on task, whether we're in a hybrid model or fully remote. Gordon, wondering, we have our health professionals waiting. They've been on for a little bit. If we could maybe bring in them next and talk about the health protocols and some of the determining factors and statistics.
Sure.
And just to clarify, sorry, we're not muted.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Just to clarify then for, in the original document, it said individual students would meet up to minimally 2 times. Will that language change to reflect the new schedules? Because the schedules are reflective of much more time with teachers than originally proposed in the plan.
Yes. Yeah. So as we have worked further with our planning groups, what we're putting out in schedules is what we're going to be able to produce and provide for students.
Okay. Mr. Mackey, if you could bring in Amy Petrosky, our Director of Health, Kelly LeBombard, our lead nurse, and Dr. Greer Clark, our school physician, please.
Can Dr. Clark raise her hand so I can find her?
I think, Mr. Mackey, you're bringing in someone who might not be wanting to present.
Okay.
Mrs. Brown, in the shared folder. Would you put up the health information? There's Dr. Clark.
Okay, to our health professionals, thank you for your time this evening. Just so everybody is aware, we did have some conversation with the health professionals today, Superintendent Smith and myself. So maybe Amy, if you want to start from a community perspective, perhaps where we are in terms of statistics, some of the protocols that the health department has developed, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I want to thank you for having us here tonight. I think it's great that we're all working so collaboratively to come up with a plan that is in the best interest of all of our community members and students and their families. So what you'll see here is I was asked some questions in advance, so I wanted to provide those answers. Sorry it wasn't as early as I would have hoped, but you could see the where we stand right now is the rate of infection is definitely better than where it was in April and May. I think that has been asked in a couple different ways by a couple different people. Our total count for the community is 286 confirmed cases. About 2/3 of those were in long-term care settings. So I think that's an important distinction, right? So we're talking about community transmission versus the healthcare setting. So consistently, over the course of the pandemic, we've been seeing about 2/3 of total cases are from those long-term care centers. People have asked about kind of where we stand with the pediatric cases. We have had our first 2 pediatric cases within the last couple weeks. They were not linked to any kind of cluster or outbreak. They were just 2 independent cases. Our numbers, last week our numbers were increasing. This week the state report has them as decreasing. We're staying at that 4 active cases for this week. Are there any other data or town specific questions that I might be able to answer? I think I kind of covered these quickly.
No, I think that's good, Amy. Could we also talk about the protocol? I know we discussed it earlier today. I know it's lengthy in terms of detail, but just if you can kind of outlay what happens if a case is suspected or we have a positive test case, what's the protocol from there, please?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a really important part of the conversation. Contact tracing will occur anytime that we have a positive student or a positive close contact of a student. So I wanted to walk through some of the scenarios that might occur through this school reopening and in-person model. So I picked Jack, and I picked him as a 2nd grader because I think it's just, it's simple. So Jack is a 2nd grader, and one of his parents or someone that he lives with in his house tests positive for COVID-19. So what we would do, given that this is an elementary school setting, is we would then restrict Jack because he has a household contact who is positive. But then, given the age group, we would restrict all of that cohort. So all of his peers would then be asked to be removed. Jack would be tested as a close household contact. Once Jack test results come back, if Jack comes back positive, then all of those cohorts would then need to be tested as close contacts of Jack. If Jack comes back negative, his whole cohort gets to return back to in-classroom learning, but Jack would have to stay out until his 14-day quarantine is up. And the 14-day quarantine is necessary because we've seen most infections happen before day 10, but in small amount of cases, they have happened up to day 14. So I think that situation is a little different if we start to look at some of the secondary schools like the middle school or the high school. Since the students will be switching classes, have different people that they're around, it's a lot harder to isolate like a cohort. So what we would do is that would require a situation where I would have lots of conversations with teachers who had that student. And I would ask certain things like, how was the mask usage in this particular class? Were people maintaining 6 feet of separation? Because if we have a classroom that's really compliant, we have good 6 feet of separation, they're always keeping their masks on, and the teacher will know this, then, you know, we would remove, let's say Jessica, we would remove Jessica from the class and have her get tested. But I don't necessarily see the reason to isolate every single person that she's had in their classroom. Now, if the teacher responds, you know, math class is really not a great time, there's a lot of non-compliance when they're hanging out. I don't know the situations that might occur, but if the teacher reports that there's not a lot of compliance, or, you know, Jessica is a student who, you know, has a really hard time with having her mask on, then the situation might be a little different. Then we might look at then excluding the people who have been closest to Jessica. So those are the two kind of different approaches that we'll take based on the grade level and how far the removal will go. So in Jack's case, in second grade, if Jack comes back positive, his whole cohort will be tested. Then that will go out one level further, right? So if there was a teacher in that classroom who, I don't know, art teacher who came to that classroom, what kind of exposure did she have to Jack? So that will be stuff that's revealed through what they call the trace back, so who they had contact with. Are there any questions relative to the process that would happen?
Amy, if that art teacher also went to other cohorts, what would happen to those other cohorts?
So really, kind of the key decision maker, and I wish I was really good at art because I would have made you a cool graphic, but it's that contact with a confirmed positive, right? So that art teacher, if they're in the classroom and we don't know if Jack's positive yet, we've removed everybody to avoid an outbreak or any kind of cluster. So we're being proactive and saying these people could have contacted Jack, who was exposed to a known contact. We're taking them out of the situation until we know what happens with Jack. Now, if Jack then is positive, then that art teacher would be considered a close contact of Jack. And then that's when we would go that one level further. But until Jack tests positive, then just removing those people who he had that intimate contact with temporarily is the furthest we'll need to go.
So that would also include anyone he rode the bus with?
Yes. Correct. For elementary school, it would be anybody he rode the bus with.
And may I ask a question, Amy? If, let's say, Jack and Jessica are siblings, so Jack's obviously at the elementary school, Jessica's at the middle school, how does that work in terms of, they'd be riding now 2 different buses, so we'd be, I'm assuming, quarantining the folks on both buses, and then we would have to trace through Jessica's passing and so forth, as you had indicated.
If Jessica is positive, yes. Yeah, once there's a student who is positive, that level of restrictions is going to expand a lot bigger, right?
Amy, there's a question in the chat about a student who tests positive who has multiple siblings. Can you just reiterate that?
So it depends on what grade the siblings are in, right? So if Jack has a sibling, Jeff, in 3rd grade, he's still in elementary school. The same thing would happen in Jeff's class as it would in Jack's class. And for all the grades that were in elementary school, if there's a close personal contact of one of our elementary age students who is positive, those cohorts would be removed until we can get the test results of Jack and Jeff. Right? Jack may be positive and Jeff may not. So Jeff's class can come back, but Jeff is still excluded for his 14 days.
Okay. And one of the questions that we had discussed, or scenarios we had discussed, is if we get this information, during the school day, and you have Jack in the classroom and we're a few hours in, we're assuming that whole cohort and teacher now will have to go out to quarantine while we're waiting on test results for Jack.
Right. So in a situation where you're already in the school, eliminating that transfer into your health room will help contain that possible contact. So if we know that, if we find out at 10 o'clock that Jack's father just tested positive, then we keep those kids there and we would dismiss them from their, I would recommend, I mean, this is your choice. I would recommend dismissing them from that classroom.
Right, to contain it so that we're not necessarily, because the protocols, as we discussed from DESE, can be somewhat confusing, because if you're bringing that entire class in a hallway down to the COVID waiting room, so to speak, you're also risking exposing other people. So we would isolate into that classroom. Continue to wear masks, continue the distancing, contact parents, and work through that.
Correct.
Is there a specific place that students would go get tested if they do show symptoms?
That's a great question. So it would really depend on their pediatrician. So we would refer them to their pediatrician. The whole cohort wouldn't need to get tested until we got, what did we call him? Jack's test results. So only Jack in that initial scenario would need to be tested. If Jack tests positive, then everybody would be testing by their pediatrician. So that's one of the, on the second page, that's one of the items that I am hoping that you guys will consider as you're deciding which model to go with. Right now, and Dr. Clark can speak to her experience, right now as a town, unless you're getting your test results from Bay State or the state lab, we're seeing delays in the testing for 10 to 14 days. So from my perspective, that will make this a little bit challenging for us to get those kids back in the classroom in a reasonable amount of time, because we may wait 10 days for a test result. Jack may come back negative, and that whole time, those whole group is waiting outside for those test results. And the reason for that is because the nation is surging right now, where we were back in April and May, and the national labs are just so overworked that it's hard to get those test results back. What Dr. Clark has been experiencing with Bay State Reference Labs and her patients is a 24 to 48 hour turnaround. So right now, that's excellent. I wish we could get that everywhere. I think we'd be able to contain the virus a lot better.
Well,
oh, you have an update? Okay.
Unfortunately, I tried to schedule kids today, and the asymptomatic children were being pushed further out. So they're not testing them. The turnaround time for the test is still quick, but they have spots for asymptomatic testing, and those kids who have symptoms will get tested faster and sooner. So,
Dr. Clark, is that even with a positive exposure?
Yes.
Asymptomatic with a positive exposure?
Yes. So if they have no symptoms, I think the positive exposure will get a priority because they'll be pushed behind the those kids who actually have symptoms. But they're testing them in two different places. They don't want the sick kids mixing so much with the healthy kids. So the list is getting long for asymptomatic testing.
And one of the problems with that is also what I noted here is up to 43% of COVID positive cases, both pediatric and the data with children is less robust, but still exists. We can see up to 43% that are asymptomatic. And I included some links to some news articles that just studies that were released July 31st that showed that children have just as much, if not more, viral load in their swabs as adults do. So what that means is our children may not be getting sick, but they are really great at spreading the virus. Just like a lot of other respiratory illnesses, kids are great vectors. So kids under 5 even shows, and you'll see this, up to 100 times more viral load in their swabs than adults. So, I mean, that's significant when we're thinking about putting kids into a classroom and then bringing other adults with them and then sending them back to their home. So the kids may not be as affected, but they're then bringing what they're being exposed to back into their homes.
So Amy and Dr. Clark, I know you've both been part of this process for us, and certainly we're grateful for your input, and Kelly as well. Basically, we're talking two options tonight, one, the fully remote, and one, the hybrid. I think we can all agree on the fact that there's a level of exposure that increases clearly from the fully remote to the hybrid. Are both of you or all three of you, based on what you know about the protocol that we're setting up, the PPE that we've purchased and we will have available for our staff and for our students, we agreed to a varying degree of potential exposure. We can agree to that because in order to be exposed, you're with other people. But based on what we know, based on the standards or the statistics within the state and the protocol that we've aligned, if we stick to the protocol that we've outlined, have we done all we can do if we come back in a hybrid model? Have we done all we can do to do the best we can to ensure safety for our staff and for our students?
I would say that Gordon, Pam, and Kelly have been awesome to work with, and I think that we're going to put in every possible protection measure that we're capable of. As a public health professional, the safest route is for the fully remote model. But if we go the hybrid route, we can continue to work until those kids, and even after they're back, to make sure every possible safety measure is in place.
One of the challenges, am I correct, is if we're experiencing that surge in the labs and someone's asymptomatic, even though there might have been a positive exposure, basically they're going to quarantine for the 14 days because we're not going to be able to have test results back, it sounds like. So there will be some time out, so to speak, a considerable amount that we'll need to be thinking about. And then there was another question, I think.
Yeah, I mean, one of my biggest concerns is the testing delays. That's tricky for all aspects of our community, right? If we're needing to wait 10 to 14 days for our test results, it's really hard to do the contact tracing that all public health professionals, CDC, right on down state to us, know is how we mitigate the spread of a virus. And what we're seeing now is, so one of the other studies from the American Academy of Pediatrics says in the last 2 weeks in July, 40% of all pediatric cases were contracted in those 2 weeks. And the reason for that is because we're starting to see kids come out of their homes and out of these safer environments and back into more community-based events like sporting events. So far, we don't have, our sports are doing a great job, but there is a local cluster of a lacrosse team where there are multiple exposures and positive cases. So I think that stat from the American Academy of Pediatrics is one that I think we need to consider. As we've slowly started moving out, 40% of all the cases have occurred in the last 2 weeks of July.
So, Amy,
and as we start to bring colleges back, put schools together, the delays at the labs are only going to increase.
So in reference to those delays, it sounds like testing is key to ensuring the real picture that we're looking at. Is there potential, say, if we were to go to a fully remote option early on, and 3 months from now, testing becomes more readily available, and maybe Dr. Clark, you can speak to this. What makes the testing more relevant? And is it a 24-hour turnover? Is it a 48-hour? What should we look for as a bar that we want to see or reach that testing now becomes relevant in the process in making a decision?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
So right now our testing is delayed, and we're saying testing being at 14 days is difficult to use testing as a way to limit how the virus spreads, right? So we want testing to be more rapid and get our results faster. When do we say that it's fast enough? So we've reached it, so our students can get results in 24 hours or 48 hours. What's the bar that makes it irrelevant to do the testing and use that?
So I think 24 to 48 hours is probably the only bar that we can use. After that, we're looking at 10 to 14 days with the national labs. That's the regular isolation anyway. So kids, the whole class will be out for 10 to 14 days. That's a long time to keep them out from learning. If we can get more testing centers, which I don't I think that will happen, but if that happens, it means that the viral load in the community is increased, and we're still going to have issues with testing as we did in the spring. I don't think there's ever going to be enough tests to have the 24 to 48 turnaround, 48-hour turnaround for us. I just think that's kind of unrealistic.
Really?
Yeah, I think right now it can be 24 to 48, and even with the mild increase that we've seen, they haven't opened back up all the testing centers yet, but they're not going to do that until the load becomes higher. And then when the load becomes higher, I think we're still going to have issues with finding spots.
And when the load is higher, we have a higher infection rate, which
Right.
is problematic in itself.
Right, right.
Because right now we're at a relatively low infection
We're
rate.
at it. Exactly.
But
And
other areas are flaring up.
So just in the 2 weeks, last week, I was able, asymptomatic could get tested within 2 days. That wasn't a problem. And then just today, I called, even Monday, today's Thursday. So Monday, I was also doing remote telemedicine, and those kids were getting tested the next day. If you're symptomatic, you're still getting tested within 24 hours. If you're asymptomatic, it has increased from within 24 hours to now, 5 days, and in some cases 7 days. One child she returned from Virginia, and they put her test at August 14th. So that's it.
So to that point, if we do decide to go fully remote, should we have a caveat that if we happen to reach that milestone, if testing becomes readily available, and if I'm sorry, viral load comes to an acceptable range, are those really the two factors that might help us be more at ease in potentially coming back?
Yes.
I think it's bigger. I think we can expand that a little bit, right? So I think we know that the only pediatric ICU in the area serves Hamden, Franklin, and Hampshire County. So we need to keep an eye on that, right? So if they start to surge and have a lack of capacity, we need to really look at what we're doing in our schools, because if our kids get sick, they'll have nowhere to go. So I think that's something. I think we need to look at the viral spread. The community spread. I think we need to look at testing capacity. Very similar stuff to, I don't know if you saw the link I sent you to the state uses three color indicators to indicate those metrics that allow us to move to the new phases. I think if we look at those for our community, our area specifically, and kind of put colors to those, it will help us make those decisions. But I don't think it's one thing in particular that's going to say, yes, now it's safe to go to school, or no, because we can't get tests back, we can't.
As we enter the fall and the normal start of what we call the flu season, do you people see the natural spike in COVID cases that would probably happen in relation to the flu, if you understand what I'm saying?
Doctor, do you want to take that?
Yes, I think the same spike is going to happen as with the flu. I think the timing is going to be about the same. I think the flu will actually be later than the COVID spikes.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's going to make it a little tricky, right? So if we have a kid who has a fever, runny nose, and headache, we're going to not know. What are we dealing with? Are we dealing with a cold? Are we Are we dealing with COVID? Are we dealing with the flu? And without the ability to get those tests back fast, we're going to be waiting 10 days to find out what the kid actually has. And the whole time, everybody in that cohort doesn't know what they've been exposed to.
Right, but isn't there going to be a natural assumption, be it right or wrong, that it's COVID, given what we're facing overall?
That's what we're going to treat it like, is
correct.
That COVID, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Dr. Clark, does it obviously make sense? I know we run Amy's office puts together a flu clinic for flu shots. Obviously, that's something that we really want to encourage, I would imagine.
Yes. I think everybody should get their flu as soon as possible, actually. And I know some of the pharmacies already have it available. So,
Gordon, I'm going to interrupt for 1 second, I can't read all the comments that are coming in, but someone had a relevant question. I think it's important. What happens if Jack has siblings and they use the bathroom? If Jack uses the bathroom and then my kid is not in their cohort and they go in and use the bathroom, it doesn't matter because now that pod is broken and everyone's exposed. What they're finding, and I'm not an epidemiologist and I'm also not a doctor, so please correct me if you think something differently, is that contact touch is way less risky than it is to have that respiratory droplet transmission. So when your kid, if Jack uses the bathroom and Jack is positive, even though he's touched the door and the faucet and the bath and the flusher, that is a much less risky behavior than if you were close, even with masks. So masks are a good mediating factor, but they're not the be all end all. It's much less risky for that type of behavior to happen than to be in the same classroom as Jack. So I hope, Chris, that I answered your question. And I know the schools, Pamela and I have been working closely together with disinfections and a disinfection process. So the schools are working really hard to get the proper product and to do it at a proper time frame, that if you do choose a hybrid model, that there's safety in that. So Chris, if you have follow-up, I'll try to see it.
Good. Obviously, it makes sense. I mean, we'll be building in, it's in our protocols, times throughout the day for hand washing and hand sanitizing. And so obviously we'd be stressing any visit to the bathroom. Hopefully there was washing the hands in the bathroom, but re-entry into the classroom, hitting the hand sanitizer.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly, I wonder if you could speak to, from the nurse's perspective, the logistics of if we are in a hybrid mode, and I know you don't have video feed with us, but you do have audio. How that might look in each individual school or each school if we have a reason to believe that one of the students or staff members might have symptoms of COVID.
So if a student presents, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, okay. So if a student presents with symptoms and they come down to the health room, each school is supposed to have their own medical waiting room. So what we would typically want to happen is the child would have a mask on, we would take their temperature, we'd make them wash their hands, and we do a quick assessment to say, could these symptoms be, suspicious of COVID? So then we would need somebody, because, 3 of our schools only have a nurse. So we would have to have somebody else that could monitor that room. We were talking about things like baby monitors, because we don't want that person to be in a room, with all these kids, but we need to monitor them until their family comes and picks them up. So, without knowing who would be coming back to school and who is opting out, I do have CNAs and LPNs and nurses that I could put in place to help the nurses. But what I'm concerned about is if there's a kid on the bus and the bus driver calls the dispatch and then they call the nurse has to leave the health room to go get that child, or somebody has to be assigned to go get that child off the bus before the other kids get off. So, I've ordered all the PPE. It's just, the details that we have to work out once we know who is available to help in these health rooms. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, very much so. Thank you, Kelly. And also, you spoke about the PPE, and Pam, maybe you could also help us with how much PPE have we ordered, specifically masks, shields, hand sanitizer, just so we have a general, I know some of us have a general idea, but so the public has an idea of what we've already purchased to combat.
Well, I can tell you that I have purchased a lot of PPE, and some of it is still on back order. We pretty much right away after it became apparent that we were going to be out, further than 2 or 3 weeks, we started to analyze the situation and make some purchases. Some of that is still on back order. Mostly that's like the disinfecting wipes. Those seem to be a hot commodity these days. So what's happening is as the vendors get in these orders, obviously they go to the hospitals and those types of settings. And as the surge goes up, then they're going to get it first over us. So I am hoping to get those, in mid-September, Gordon. I think that's what we were told. We have ordered electrostatic sprayers for one for each of the schools, and that's supposed to help with larger cleaning of areas. We've ordered about 20,000 face masks. I've ordered shields. We've ordered, those are disposable masks and the disposable shields. We've ordered, let me see, what am I missing, Kelly?
So we ordered some youth reusable masks. I think like 975 of those. And we also ordered 500 reusable adult masks, for teachers. We've also ordered gowns for the staff that are going to be with students that, maybe can't wear a mask or have difficulty wearing a mask. So like some of the kids in special ed, their teachers may need, a gown, a face mask, a shield, gloves. We've ordered all of that. I also ordered some masks where you can actually see the mouth so that students that are either deaf or, really need to see the teacher's face, that's open there, and I ordered them for teachers and staff.
We've also tons of hand sanitizer as well.
Yeah, hand sanitizer for each classroom.
Yeah, so I have quart bottles for each of the classrooms. I believe those are now in. And also we ordered like 400 gallons of hand sanitizer to be able to fill up. And these were, Desi kind of worked with districts giving estimates, months ago. So all districts have done this, and I do feel pretty confident in that area.
So just to add to that, because we're talking about some of the stuff that's on back order. Back in March, we began working with Amy's office, Kelly, and started to look at all the disinfectants we use in schools. So we looked at our inventory then. We anticipated that we were going to need to increase that inventory, and I'm very glad that we did that. So we do have the disinfectant that we need. We do have the other cleaning products that we need. We have a disinfecting product that at the end of the day we'll be using, and it sits on the surface, killing obviously bacteria and viruses. We will be working with we've already worked with our custodians, but we'll be going back through all of this in the next couple weeks to break out what the day is going to look like, because that's going to be important, so that they know how we're cleaning during and disinfecting during the day, and how we're taking that a step further during the overnight, and then what it looks like if we're in a hybrid model on Wednesday to take it even further. And that's where those electrostatic sprayers might come in and be very beneficial with all of that. And certainly Dr. Welsh is raising her hand. There's a ton of PPE that Dr. Welsh has ordered as well. Go ahead, Dr. Welsh, sorry.
I just wanted to say really quickly, Monday night I talked about hoping that we would be providing direct services as much as we can to some of our students, and I wanted our staff to feel that we had provided them with adequate protection. And so I ordered some additional masks, face shields, gowns, and gloves specifically for staff in those classrooms to use, so that they would feel that we had ample supply. And additionally, we've purchased plexiglass shields for our therapists to use as they're working, face to face with some of our students. We actually have one set up in my office right now, because we're doing a little bit of the trying to make up some of the time we lost during the closure with special ed evaluations. So we're trying that as well. So we've also purchased those for every school. So I just wanted to add, I worked with Mr. Gonzalez from the ELEA, and we talked a little bit about what we thought would be appropriate to supplement what the district has already done.
So Dr. Welch, to that point, if we do go to a fully remote program, you would still recommend that we have some in-person, develop an in-person program for some students?
We would
Correct.
offer it, Greg. I just had my own webinar today, and that is still the expectation from for the state, the associate commissioner, and the state director for student services. So what I would say is we would offer it, and if families wanted to access it, we would certainly look at a way to make sure that we were meeting the students' needs, but that we were also being respectful of the model that was in place. So it would be a possibility, yes. And again, that's based on the expectation that was handed down to me.
Right. So so if we do, if we go fully remote, we would still look to develop that program going forward.
As an option for families,
As
yes.
an option. Yep. Okay. And we'd have the staff to do that and transportation to do that? We would work that out.
Transportation has already been put into place. As far as staff, I would have to defer to whatever decisions they made and make my decision, or, you know, determine how I would get those services to students.
Okay.
Okay. There is a question which I think while we have our health and medical experts with us regarding, so we were obviously early on in this, we were talking about monitoring for the symptoms. And I did make the statement, and I agree with this statement, that when you're ill, stay home, regardless of whether it's COVID or something else. But I think the question is, when someone, say, has a cold, are we moving into it, thinking that that's COVID? That we have to treat everything that has those similar symptoms as a possible COVID situation?
I think the problem's going to be with the child who has a cold. Basically, there's no testing for a cold, and so we would have to test every child with upper respiratory symptoms for COVID. I think the one who has the flu is actually the better off one, because up until so far, we're presuming that they only have one disease. And so if they test positive for flu, we're deciding they don't have COVID. I don't know that that's okay, but I think that's what we're going with right now. So if you have the flu and you get treated, you could technically return to school much sooner than if you had COVID and symptoms of COVID. So if you have the flu and we can test you and it's positive, you get treatment, you return sooner. If you have a cold and we test you for COVID, it depends on the turnaround for the COVID. So, and then you can return if it's negative.
Also, one other technique I've heard is like a fever of unknown origin, right? So if you are sick and you go to the doctor and you have strep throat or an ear infection, we can then say, you know, there's a reason for your fever, and most likely you don't have an ear infection and COVID. So you treat the fever. If it goes away, then the fever's gone, and we know that it worked on the ear infection. But if that fever persists, you know, the doctor might, I don't know what a doctor would do. I'm not a doctor. But they would probably see if there was another reason why that fever isn't going away on antibiotics. So if we have a fever of unknown origin, there's no ear infection, there's nothing we can say, then I think, yes, we do have to assume it's COVID.
Right. I think we're going to be testing most kids as if they have COVID. And the test, I have several children in my practice who've been tested multiple times. These are the kids with delays, the kid with asthma, the kid with whatever. Anytime they get sick, they're tested. And I spoke to a mom today and I said, okay, all her tests are negative, and she's had 5. And I mean, she's probably had 1 a month, the poor child, but she's chronically ill, major respiratory disease. So she gets tested when she gets sick.
Some of the inquiries that I've been receiving are if we go fully remote, the potential is there, A, that we're out for the full year because not much will change save the vaccine, which in all likeliness, we won't have enough people vaccinated at least for a year. So we're talking about the lack of socialization, the lack of normal routine, the inability for our staff and educators to meet new students of the school year. Would it be fair to say that there is, if we were to have a smaller groups, not even a full cohort, but say 4 to 5 students come in maybe 2 or 3 times in the first couple of weeks of school to meet with their teachers, fully masked, complete social distancing, maybe just an hour or so where the educator could meet the students, have, although very limited, some socialization with other students, kind of meet some of that criteria on a very limited basis, and then we just go fully remote. Is there big concern with small groups of 5 to 6 people who practice social distancing with masks? Is that a viable option?
That was one of the things we talked about earlier, and I was kind of on the fence about that. And since then, I've been thinking about it. And one of the great things that we can do in that option is do that outside. So when school starts, we're going to have nice weather, and we know that being outside is much safer than being in an enclosed space. So if you wanted to sit down, 5 kids in a circle, we have the dots, they meet their teachers, they play a game with nothing shared. That seems safe and reasonable to me, given that they're outside. I don't know, Dr. Clark.
I agree. I think the smaller groups are better. The only ideal is keeping them home. But I do agree that we're going to have to loosen up on some of this, and to bring them in, but outside is the best option. To bring them in small groups is a better option. To bring them in the full class at a time is not an option at all. So.
Yeah, right. And I think we would make it, an idea like that, and I don't know if we'll do that, but would certainly be optional for families to decide for themselves.
Right.
If they wanted to send the students in for that. But certainly would meet at least some of the things that I've heard, that people want some socialization, want to meet the new teachers, get some normalcy. I know none of this is normal with masks on. It won't be normal, but just an opportunity to do that might be something at least. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for our health professionals?
I just had a question about the re-evaluation process. So say we were to enter into a remote-only model. What would a recommendation be for re-evaluating when we go back potentially into a hybrid next, or into a different phase of bringing the students back? Would that be something we want to consider every semester based on your professional opinions, or should we be checking in every 6 weeks, every 8 weeks? What do you think about that?
I think we're going to see a trend, right? So the southern schools are starting to go in already. And I think we're going to know kind of where we're heading pretty soon into the school year, based on what the other communities are doing with the in-person stuff and the sports that are starting. But maybe I wasn't totally clear. I don't know, Gordon or whoever's controlling the screen. The link that I shared in the document on the front page, last bullet, that had the link to the DPH's most recent report. Can someone show page 1 of that? Or I can't share my screen. Oh, I might be able to.
Is it on your the sheet that you sent to the school committee?
It's the last bullet. Well, it's the bullet right before the contact tracing, and it's a link to the most recent DPH report.
Amy,
Okay, I got it.
you got it?
So I believe that report has the metrics. Let me see. Maybe it's just the daily report. I'm sorry.
Close your eyes if you get seasick.
And while we're scrolling for that, would that again be a time when we could then lean on both yourself and Dr. Clark and Ms. LaBombard to come back and rejoin our conversation, so that if we are having to be flexible and nimble and make decisions as to whether or not we're able to maybe enter into a hybrid model, if we were to vote remote tonight at the conclusion of the first semester or after the conclusion of the second semester, we're seeing metrics pointing in the right direction, that you all would be able to engage with us in a conversation to then make a decision to come back in person.
Yeah, I'm happy to meet with you guys as often as you feel it's necessary. I think having collaboration between all of us is in the best interest of the community, and I can make that happen whenever you're interested. It's not there. I just scrolled through it really fast. It must be on only the daily reports. Basically, the reports list, I think it's 5 key indicators: capacity at hospitals, testing capacity, turnaround time, and those different levels of what the governor's office is using for if we can move through those phases. So I think we would mirror something similar to that and use that as our basis for communication. You know, if we see testing, if we see rates continue to be as low as they are in communities that have gone back into school, that there hasn't been a huge amount of surge, then, I mean, using their information would be a great tool for us, right? So taking what other communities have learned in that process and using it to help inform us. Because one of the things is, I think I put it on the sheet, is COVID is a novel virus, which means it's new, which means the physicians, we epidemiologists and public health professionals, we don't know what it's going to do. We really don't. So the only way that we're going to find out is watching the communities that are going back to school to see how it plays in their small cohorts and schools and the process that they're using. The other thing is watching the reinfection rate. So right now we're starting to see people who had previously had COVID recover, have 2 negative tests, no symptoms, that are now reinfected. So we don't know if that's an anomaly, or is that something that we're going to see regularly, right? So it's just, there's so many unknowns. And those are all the things that I'll keep an eye on to help inform you guys. And, you know, Dr. Clark's going to be on the cutting edge of those things. So like
I was just going to say, I think like as part of our work going forward, our committee should probably have minimally Amy and Dr. Clark and maybe Ms. LaBombard at our school committee meetings at least once a month to maybe give us an update. And that's not to put a tremendous request on all of your time, but so we are monitoring this and we're able to then continually reevaluate the strategy that we're putting forward for the students in our community, so that we can say, okay, once a month, this is what we're noticing across our community, what we're noticing across our state, and this is what we're noticing, and therefore this is what we should be doing about it. Whether it's staying the course or, you know, making that nimble turn rather than a pivot, to be able to then adjust, so that if we are in a really strong position, or if we're noticing that things are from the communities that have reopened, that then we're poised to be able to make an adjustment that will benefit our students.
I have a question. Dr. Clark, I'm addressing this to you because my big concern about keeping the kids home and having them not get to school and the whole socialization of that. We have fantastic counselors. We've got adjustment counselors, you know, lots of staff that's there to help our children. But have you been noticing an increase in your patients that are coming in with like social emotional issues, depression, possibly? My huge fear is unseen, unrecognized abuse that, you know, isn't getting seen by teachers and it's going unchecked.
So I'm seeing 2 groups. The first is those kids who have high anxiety anyway and were not successful socially in school. They have done incredibly well being home. So there has been some benefit. They have excelled somewhat socially because that distance of the screen that they tend to use is helping them to move along fine. I have the other group that's staying the course. They're able to connect with their friends and, you know, do some social distancing, and they're doing fine. And then there's a group that is really suffering, very anxious anyway, and you know, the world's ending for them. You know, the sky's falling, and they're having a little bit of an issue. I tend to just explain to them that we're all having that issue, and be honest, when you think about it, we're all not sleeping at night for various reasons. It might be the going back to school thing that we're all dealing with right now, but when it started, how big was this disease actually going to be? So I don't think it's inappropriate for them to have a little anxiety behind it. I haven't had to do a lot of referrals for those children. They are able to grasp it. And small intervention is working for them with the exercise, being outside. I don't know what's going to happen with the winter, and the daylight, the sun is really helpful for a lot of these kids. So we'll see what happens. I think we can try to get in front of it, and if it's that one more item of planning to do, it might be having Zoom dance parties and all that kind of stuff, just to get them connected a little bit more than they would have been, especially for the middle school. I think the high schoolers are out anyway. I don't think they're distancing, they're out. They might be wearing masks. They're working, a lot of them, so
Right.
they're out. It's going to be middle school and under, and honestly, the hardest hit are going to be the preschoolers, and I don't know how to get them out. So.
All right.
In terms of screening for that, though, one tool that will be helpful is we have now standardized social emotional surveys for the kids, grades 3 and up, and then observational forms for K-2 or pre-K to 2. So obviously it's not the panacea, but we will be able to monitor how kids are feeling emotionally. And that will be part of our MTSS work, is to really keep an eye on kids who are, really struggling in terms of anxiety or depression or any other signs of things that might be going on.
Thank you, Heather. You just answered my question.
Okay.
I also think, part of what we'll need to be doing is staying in communication with families and, encouraging them to reach out to us if they're seeing something that we may not capture in whatever it is that we're doing, either in a hybrid or in a remote model. I think that I noticed that on the schedules, a lot of the schools have opportunities for families to reach out. I know that the school counselors are going to be very engaged and very involved. And again, I think our teachers are incredibly sensitive and know their students well, and have been more than responsive in terms of identifying some things that we followed up on as a district and addressed. So I just, I encourage that communication, and know that our staff will do their utmost again to ensure that we cover that base as well. I think the day-to-day interactions are going to be incredibly important.
Dr. Welch, thank you for saying that, because I had mentioned it in the last meeting, but the work that each school did while we were in the remote learning this spring was absolutely amazing, in terms of making sure that families had internet access, Chromebooks, food, things like that, and also checking on kids who weren't engaged to see if there are any barriers that we could help with. So this tool is just a tool to continue with. The tool I was talking about is really just to support that work. It's really the teachers and staff who are doing some amazing things already.
Okay, is there any other questions or discussion for our health professionals? You have all been so very helpful, and I am grateful for all the time you have given to this community and the kids of our district. This is a tough decision to make. Certainly, with the information that you have provided, we are well educated on the situation. So thank you all for your time this evening, and with all the prior work you have done and going forward. We appreciate your willingness to work with us. So thank you all for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, folks.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so we have a general idea of the two models. We're looking at reopening with either a fully remote or reopening with a hybrid. The new kind of idea that we've added to the fully remote potentially is the opportunity for very small groups of children to come in, or students, I should say, to meet their teachers, have a little bit of socialization in the first couple of weeks, and perhaps if it's successful, even maybe once a month, I don't know, once a month or something. We could develop that as we go forward. But I think at least we with that option provide a chance for some socialization and some a little bit of normalcy in this strange time. So, is there anybody else that folks the committee would like to bring into the meeting? We have a few other. We had talked about food services. Does anybody else have questions they're looking to still have answered on the committee?
I guess I was wondering about the food services because I know that the free and reduced can be a difficult thing for people to ask for to get. And how well has that been going? I don't know how we did it. I have a little bit of an idea of how they did it this year, but how are we going to do that moving forward? If we do remote, how's that going to work out?
So Lori Paul, our Director of Food Services, I believe is in the audience. But to start off that, while Mr. Mackey looks to bring her in. So what we did in March is we partnered with Springfield, actually so did Longmeadow, and we provided information as to where various areas in the Springfield Public Schools were that they could pick up a grab-and-go meal. And
Excuse me, Gordon?
Yep.
Lori, can you raise your hand? Because I got a long list of attendees here. Oh.
Did we lose Heather?
She got Heather's invite. Okay, hang on. That's why I can't see her.
Heather's in the audience now too. Oh, Heather's back.
It's not Lori, sorry, it was really just me.
It really was just you. Is Lori in the audience? Do you see her?
She's supposed to be on there. I spoke to her earlier.
I need her to raise her hand and then she'll jump to the top and I'll see her name.
Okay.
I can't find her.
I don't see her name in the list.
I don't think she's there.
No. Pam, can you text her and maybe see if she's available? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
When she jumps in, I'll bring her in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Have her raise her hand.
Okay.
In this most recent survey that we sent out to families, we put the results in the shared folder. We have asked who would be interested in participating in a grab-and-go type situation for meals. And so we are looking to develop that program so that no matter what, we're in either a hybrid model or a fully remote, that we can provide the opportunity for grab-and-go meals. I think Mrs. Brown is putting it up on the screen right here.
And that would be us doing it or us having our kids? Because it was fine for the summer and just getting into it, but I think that we probably should be taking care of that ourselves at this point.
So we would be setting this up probably in the last we spoke about it, we would set it up. We have two fully working kitchens. Would be in the high school and the middle school, and we would have to set up a process for that grab and go.
It'd also be easier for folks to come get their food as well, rather than having to go to Springfield.
Right.
I also feel like we might need to do the survey again if we do decide to go fully remote.
And that's, that's a great point. We obviously will be getting out another survey that, once we have a somewhat of a dedicated direction to find out, okay, where are our families now? Many people put in the comments that, they're still unsure. And so we're going to need to know final numbers once they know what direction we're going. We'll also add this piece again. And in the survey, while we're waiting for Mrs. Paul, we also asked about who might still be in need of Chromebooks and so forth. And so we have an idea there. And so we'll be working with our IT department to make sure that we cover that. We have ordered 400 additional Chromebooks, but we know that probably every school district in Massachusetts has also ordered. So we know that those are probably not going to be here September 1st. So we will be prepared utilizing what we have in inventory to make sure we outfit all our students. And as I said earlier in the presentation, make sure that our paraprofessionals have computers as well.
Hi, Gordon. Excuse me, Lori's having technical difficulties and couldn't get to raise her hand, but I called her so she can hear you. And if she can speak through the microphone here so everyone can hear her. So Lori, Paul, thank you for joining us. Lori?
Yes, thank you. I still hear Gordon speaking though. I'm watching it live on Facebook.
Oh, you should probably close that one and just turn that volume down. Everybody can hear you here. So I think that, Greg, was it you that asked Lori a question? Or I forgot who asked the question. I apologize.
It was Beth. Yeah, Beth, do you have that question?
Yeah, I had asked, Lori, I was just asking about, I know that this summer and in the spring we had gone through Springfield for free and reduced. And just, I know we had done the survey, but that was a little bit confusing. I don't know if parents were thinking like free and reduced or not. But I was just asking pretty much what you have planned for the fall, how we're going to work this to, and just what your team's got ready to do.
Right. And again, thank you for having me. I have been in contact with my full staff. They're ready and willing and able to go in any direction that's chosen. I've been working individually with each school principal for the different reopening possibilities. And if it is full remote, absolutely. We do need to offer a grab and go meals, not only for the fact that we do have the free and reduced, but we're a federally funded program, so we do have to offer it to everybody. And there are people out there struggling that don't want to, say or anything. But if it's available, we will have it prepared and ready for them because we need to. And then if we is a hybrid, like I said, I've been working with each of the individual school principals to come up with the best, safest plan to have meals for all of our kids.
And I just wanted to add that if folks out there do need some help, it is a confidential program that we're here to help you with. So I just want to reiterate that. These are tough, challenging times, so we'll all get through it together.
And Pam, can I just add again, if a family would feel more comfortable speaking through their child's teacher, a lot of our teachers have done a wonderful job again of advocating for things that families need. They've delivered groceries and meals themselves, but have also reached out to I'm not sure I would have advocated for that, but it was very important and very much appreciated. But again, there are lots of ways that a family could communicate that issue, and we will take care.
Good point. Lori, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, that's on, I'm all set on this end. Like I said, we're up and ready. My staff is ready for whatever decisions made. I think we have a very strong program. We work very closely with the Board of Health and Amy Petrowski and her team. She's always awesome. And, we've always been the leader in all our sanitation and safety practices within all of our schools. So we're up and ready for whatever needs to go forward.
Great. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you. I apologize for the technical difficulty.
Any other questions for Lori in terms of food services from the committee? Okay. Thank you, Lori, so much.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay, other information folks are seeking further discussion on either option. What's the thought of the committee?
I just have a question about if students are not able to come on based on the revised schedule. So if students aren't able to come on at the times of live instruction, do we have a backup plan for them? Or have we talked to the ELEA about potentially adjusting some teachers' work schedules to accommodate coming on with students after hours because both families might be at work and there's nobody present to have a child log on to a device? Are we recording some of these lessons so that if a child misses live instruction, they're able to then watch that once a family member is home to facilitate the learning that can happen then? Because even if we move to a fully remote fashion, we don't know that we're going to have adults present in the homes that can actually facilitate the learning or ensure that kids are logging on. And that could be kindergartners all the way through middle and high schoolers. So just want to make sure that we have those contingency plans in place. And yes, it might appear to be a detail, but that's another big part of this decision is what do we do if families can't accommodate the schedules that we're creating for live instruction?
So those are discussions that are going on, both somewhat formally, as you said, with the ELEA, and we have a scheduled meeting on Tuesday to continue those conversations. But we're also problem solving at the building level. I think even and I hate to say this word, I guess regular years, I don't know if we'll ever get back to defining what regular is, but our staff has already been utilizing, we have staff members who do film lessons and have that ready when they have absences and so forth. We have other staff members that have used Google Classroom to make sure that they have all the information set for predominantly students who may have missed class for whatever reason or may be out for a few days. And so we would certainly look at what we've used in the past and how we make that even more efficient as we move forward.
I'm guessing just more structured because it's wonderful if my child lands in a class where the teacher does record lessons and then I know that I've kind of got a safeguard. But if my child lands in a class where the teacher isn't regularly adhering to a practice such as that, then I might not necessarily have that support built in. And if I'm back at work or my husband's back at work or something to that effect happens and there's not somebody there who's monitoring and actively engaging in the learning alongside of the child, then I think that's when we need to ensure that we have that as like a consistent practice, whether it's identifying a lead teacher, maybe utilizing the department heads, but trying to think of ways that we can put those safeguards in place so that regardless of setting, regardless of what children have access to at home, they're not missing out on the opportunity to move forward with curricula. They're not missing out on the opportunity to continue to move forward with addressing grade level standards like their peers would be.
Sure, no, that makes sense. And we're going to continue that conversation and continue planning to make sure that we have things in place.
Then if we were to come back in a remote fashion, I know some other districts have considered bringing their youngest of students back and spreading them out further across their district. Is that something that we have any possibility to do? Just thinking about learning to read, especially K-1, and just socializing in school and all of those pieces. If we were to come back remote, let's say 3 to 12, would we have the capacity to spread our K-2 students out across the remaining classrooms within the district?
So I think all these things can be considered. Right now, we haven't planned out each one of those scenarios. We've been focused in on creating the 3 models that we've been discussing. But as we go forward, if we have an idea, say as of tonight, what we're at least endorsing for whatever set time frame, now we have time to start to look at other ways that we can become efficient or more efficient in that model.
And Sarah, to take that one step further, I think if we are to go fully remote and we decide potentially to revisit for a January 1 timeframe, part of that decision to revisit may be something different other than the hybrid model that we're showing right now. So it could be something that looks like that, and we could base that on what's happened in other school districts, real data. Just a thought.
I guess if I can just chirp in, I think first of all, if we go remote, we go hybrid, I think that we need to have our families, they need to just grasp onto this and go with it. And it's going to be tough, and the scheduling is going to be tough. And, we'll see what we could do with those families that maybe are having trouble with it. But I also hope that we do, after we made this decision, I know there's a lot of planning that goes beyond that. And I hope that we're not, obviously you guys are the professionals, but that we're aware of what's happening as each of these steps go on. I think that, I know I might've been referred to as a little harsh in some of the Facebook messages, but the kids have to understand, the parents have to understand that if this goes remote, this is school. And there's expectations in school, and those expectations need to follow through that are set by the teachers and the school system of what it is we expect. And I think that those expectations might be similar, but like Greg was saying, I hope that if we go back, that we have the opportunity to discuss this, every meeting. It should be a little something discussed. How are things looking? How's it going? What do we need? How can we help the kids? What are we doing well? What do we need help with? So I guess I feel this is just a vote today to help our administrators and our teachers plan for the fall. And I hope that we can have it be a constant, unfortunately, it's going to be a constant conversation all year, and that they're positive. So that's my 2 cents.
I look at it in the same way, that this is the first step in a very, very complex multi-step system. I think we all agree that there's value in some sort of socialization at the beginning of the year so that the kids can get used to the curriculum, their teachers, maybe some of their peers in small groups, and then move on. And I also like the idea of revisiting this thing, let's say at Christmas, with the help of our health professionals to continue to guide us. I like Sarah's idea of getting monthly reports from them to see where the trends are. I don't want to rely just on data that we read in the media. I like local data, and I think that's one way to accomplish it. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. I just think we need to
Go
ahead.
remote. Oh,
Go ahead, Antonella.
sorry. I do agree with Greg, trying to meet with the students beforehand, kind of going over routines and procedures for the students and making sure that the expectations are clear about assignments, about times being met. And the expectations are for the students, and making sure that the parents know what the expectations are, just to make it more successful. I do think, though, that we might want to revisit this before Christmas, just because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the trends are going to be like. So maybe it'll be better before Christmas, because I think we all know that the students are learning more when they are in front of the teachers. And it is unfortunate that this is the situation that we're all in right now. But we do want to do what's best for our kids.
I agree with all of that. The only reason I said Christmas was towards the end of the first semester. And that's the only reason I put that date out. I agree with the expectations and everything that everybody's saying. It's just, this, as I said, it's the first step in a very complex process, and nobody knows where the numbers are going to be. Maybe in a month it'll look a lot better. Maybe in 6 or 8 weeks. We don't know that yet. That's why we need to constantly get updates from our health professionals, including everybody else that's involved. I think we're all on the same page here.
And I had thrown out the January 1 day because what I'd like to do is give our staff at least some indication or some stability in terms of what the next couple of months will look like. And if we get 2 months of data, health data, we can start to look at this, beginning of November, end of November, to come back potentially in a January 1, if that's at all feasible. I don't know that we'll be able to do that. As I said, I don't know what else would change, save a vaccine that's widely distributed. So we could find that other districts are very successful and there's low exposure and viral spread. And so that might help us to come back, but other factors aren't going to change. We have low transmission right now. We have low numbers in the state. And if we still decide not to go, I don't know what else is going to change to get us back in.
Yeah,
Just being realistic. That's
I
all.
just want to reiterate, though, I think we've got to come up with some contingency plans because home circumstances, I really think, are going to look drastically different when we reopen. And that doesn't mean that schools are serving as babysitters, but that means that schools have served a purpose for families. It's to educate their child. And if we don't put some contingency plans in place for families who are now potentially both going back to work, then we're going to end up with kids who are going to have large gaps. And if we're asking families to now hire babysitters or tutors, then we're not really giving them access to a public education. So we've got to really be thinking about how do we support families by maybe adjusting some hours for teachers, maybe thinking about, like I said, videotaping instruction across a grade level so that kids continue to have access to the education they would have had access to as best they can given the current circumstances, because we have to be realistic, like we keep saying, and not every family is going to be able to have their child on a computer starting at 7:25 or 8:30, just based on families having to go to work as well.
I guess where are these children gonna be though? I mean, I don't disagree with you, Sarah, but
it could be with grandparents, Beth, and maybe a grandparent isn't capable of monitoring a child being online and ensuring that they're adhering to their work, or maybe they're with a daycare provider, and that might not be possible if they're in a daycare setting. I don't know that that's going to be a possibility to have kids logging onto devices. And then if there's multiple kids in a room, how's that going to work with trying to listen to a teacher teach and then trying to do work? I just think that could be complicated for some families. I'm not saying all, but I think it's going to be a reality that some of the families in our town are faced with. Yeah. And we should be thinking about that as we continue to craft plans. And I'm happy to hear Gordon say that that's already begun as part of a discussion. But I think we just have to keep trying to think about creative and out of the box ways to be able to support as many kids, to cast as wide a net as possible. Because that's our goal, is to ensure that there's achievement for all kids in our district. So continuing to stay that course, regardless of the delivery that we're taking. And if it's remote, then we've still got to think about how we catch as many kids as possible. Especially now that we might be in a different place than we were when the pandemic first started. Some families might be sending them to a grandparent who's out of town, and maybe that they don't have internet at their home. There could be lots of different situations that we just don't know about.
Well, maybe we can work something with the union out to allow some teacher on every grade level, but then that student's got to be with that teacher too, because you might not get every teacher that's comfortable. And, if we're going to record something, then it's going to be recorded and then it can be done afterwards. But I think that's obviously that's a technicality that's got to get fixed afterwards. But, I just think that also there's the opportunity to be in those small little groups of Zoom meetings with your peers. That's really important too. And that's where I guess I feel these kids might be missing out on that one-to-one stuff if they're watching a video later on. And that's what my concern is. It goes back to just the socialization bit of it. And we should have a tech-savvy kid for grandparents. Just lighthearted.
So,
all right, thank you.
I am planning on some not that this is going to help everything, but training for families around these issues. But I also wanted to say that, it's quite possible that we have some staff who are in a similar situation where they have kids at home that might be interested in a different schedule. But we have to obviously talk with folks about that.
And are we going to be okay for devices? I know you said we were ordering 400 more, but I'm just making sure, because now if we are on for longer stretches of time, and now families who maybe didn't take a device for a second child at the home might want a device because the expectations are shifting if we go fully remote than what they were from March to June, we might see families wanting to double up and have 2 devices in the home so that one child can be on from 9 to 11 and the other can be on at 9:30 to 12.
Sure. So we've already begun that planning, the contingency, knowing that unfortunately, every district is a race against time here, purchasing technology, purchasing PPE, and so forth. And we will be ready to open, and then we will also put a process in place as we get new devices in of how we can swap out and provide the newer devices and take the ones that might be falling off the support cliff with Google.
And then will we be discussing where teachers will be teaching from after a vote takes place, or how will those negotiations move forward with ELEA in terms of if we were to go remote? I know I mentioned it last time. Would teachers still be coming into the classrooms to teach from the classrooms?
So I think all of this is going to be in the discussion. We scheduled, Monday we were talking about some things, and we've scheduled a more formal meeting, even though we've been meeting really since early April with the ELEA. But we have a much more formal meeting to start to look at a lot of these different situations that have been brought up in the discussion tonight, Tuesday, and we'll continue to schedule meetings as we need them.
And then I have questions about professional development, but I don't know if you want to do the vote first and then ask the questions about PD, or if you want to talk about PD before we do the vote.
I always like talking about PD.
Is that okay, Greg, or do you want to take the vote
Well,
first?
how's everybody else feeling? Are folks feeling like we're getting close to an opportunity to vote on something here?
Will the PD affect whether it's remote or hybrid?
I don't think so.
No. I just have questions to clarify.
So the question on the table in terms of how we reopen would be a fully remote program where students would not be coming back. We would potentially have the opportunity to bring them back in small groups a few times at the beginning of the year, potentially for some socialization and to get to know their teacher and also get down some routines. Or the other option would be to go to a hybrid model where we'd have two cohorts. We would break the population in half. The student population, half of them would come Monday, Tuesday. Wednesday would be remote learning, and the other half would come Thursday, Friday. And when the students are not in the classroom, they would be learning remotely. Those are really the two options we're looking at. Is there anything else anybody would like to discuss other than or including those two options?
Would you have to put in the first option that we would revisit it?
Absolutely.
In a certain amount of I don't know what the time frame is that we would want to revisit it, but
I don't think you would have to put I think the option to revisit at any time would be sufficient.
Well, I would tend to want to pick a date because I would like to give our staff an opportunity to do some real planning. So if we were to go remote, I'd like to say we're going to be doing that for a few months so that we could get that fully underway with some time certainty. Again, I go back to the January 1 date. That would give us most of half of September, October, November, and December. So 3.5 months, about 14 weeks, 13 weeks.
So we'd be bringing that conversation about possibly January 1st. It should maybe be, that conversation should start slowly in November. How are things going?
Yep.
You know, and I think we should bring this up. It should be something we talk about all the time because this is
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to be talking about it. Do you want to look at Thanksgiving then?
Well, I think to Beth's point, the discussion should begin end of October, beginning of November. I would say if we're going to shoot for a January 1 potential, then we want to make a decision, first week in December at the latest. So we give families plenty of notice as much as we can, and also our staff a chance to pivot to a different learning environment. Does that seem like a reasonable time frame, Heather, Gordon?
When would be the end of the semester for the high school?
That's in
When
January.
would they start their spring semester?
The high school generally is the mid to late January for their semester.
Okay, would that maybe be a good starting point if we think we might want to go back? It'll give us a couple weeks after Christmas break where they've all gone away and they've caught the COVID, and then they can come back, and you know what I mean? And then the high school has a neat break, and it's the second half of the year. It's the beginning of a new semester and everything.
Basically, they try to split the year, just as you said, directly in half, so that's when they have their mid-year exams.
So I guess I'm thinking that if we're going to maybe try to get them back, it would be the beginning of the third semester at the half year point. And it's just a good breaking point because the block scheduling will be switching off, and the little kids will have had, you know, two grading semesters at that point.
But don't we have to talk about a date when we revisit this?
Yeah.
And make a
Well,
decision?
so yes, Bill, I think if we went with a January 15th date, like I said, I would like to pick a date, then we would also pick a date that we would want to decide by. And so maybe we give it a month lead. So we would December 15th, January 15th.
All right.
So if you're looking at the high school, I think you're going to be later in January this year, given that we're starting later with the 10 days prior to the start of students.
Well, could we come back and finish off the semester potentially if we came back the 15th? Because I acknowledge, Beth, your point about the holidays, and to give it another 2 weeks, I think that's actually probably responsible. To come back for the final few days of the semester might not be a bad thing to finish it off. So
yeah, that's true.
I'm still hanging on that July 5th or the January 15th date.
All right. Yeah, and then it'll be full circle. They'll see him a little bit at the beginning. Hopefully they can see him a little bit at the end.
January 18th is Martin Luther King Day. That's a Monday. 15th is a Friday, just to give you actual dates.
Yeah. So,
well, that might not be bad, just to see how it is. And then if anybody gets sick over the weekend,
yeah,
we're back to remote.
So are we back to?
Go ahead, Bill.
Are we going to look at December 15th as the date that we would revisit this?
Well, that we would decide by. I'd like to give a full month for us to pivot.
Right.
And again, I don't know the how reasonable it is for us to think that we're going to get back, because save the vaccine, nothing. I don't see much else changing other than other districts that do go back and are COVID free somehow. So I just want to caution that preliminarily we can look at a mid-January potential for coming back, but we would have to see something change that doesn't exist right now.
We might even find that the PPEs are working. I mean, we're really low rates right now up here where people are actually doing it. You can't compare us to Georgia because they don't apparently not going there. But anyways, you know, maybe we will find that things aren't as bad as we think because we're actually doing what is best for our health.
Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see how it, because it's taking these points. You said it's novel and it's new and it's changing. We'll just have to wait and see. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I'm just trying to figure out how to crack.
Okay. So to that point, Gordon, Pam, Heather, does that schedule make sense? Do you see any flaws in at least trying to revisit and look at those dates?
To revisit it in a meeting at December 15th?
Well, I'd say we'd like to make a decision by then. So potentially we would revisit this, end of November, beginning of December, have a decision by the 15th. So we have a full month to transition to, if we're able to come in for a hybrid, if we do in fact agree to go remote tonight.
Sure. I mean, I would agree with the comments that have been made throughout, that I think at least one meeting a month, this should be a standing item.
Oh, I think it's going to be at least that.
And I think we'll be discussing elements of all of that as we go through. And so if we're doing that consistently, we should be able to then hopefully have an informed decision in December.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do, be informed in all of our decisions. So yeah, I agree.
Let me,
Heather, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you've already asked, Dr. Clark and Kelly Bombard and Amy Petrosky to join you on a monthly basis, and they're more than willing to do that. So, they'll inform you so you can make those decisions going forward.
Great.
All right, let me take a stab at this if everybody's ready. I move that that we start the school year fully remote, to revisit this and get updates on a monthly basis, and make a decision by December 15th on what we're going to do for the second half of the year, beginning January 15th.
Should we add maybe a couple days at the beginning?
Yeah, Bill, if we could add in, working with our staff, if we're able to have some of those small group sessions.
All right, including small group sessions at the beginning of the year to be held outside if possible, as recommended by our health physician.
Okay. And right, I mean, we may be inside, but certainly social distancing, fully masked, and relying on our health professionals to assist us in exactly how that looks, as well as discussion with our staff to make sure it's logistically feasible too. Okay.
Smaller groups, right?
Yes.
Smaller groups, yep.
Does that work, Kathy? You got all
One
that?
thing I think we will have to look at, and Dr. Welsh had mentioned it earlier, we'll still have a certain part of our population that we're going to have to plan for. And,
Right.
That may have some different programming than fully remote.
Right. But I think we've captured the gist of it in the motion.
Well, if you could add that too, Bill, maybe to the motion, that we will work with,
We will work with the Director of Student Services to address that population.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Consiglio.
No problem.
So the motion has been made by Mr. Fonseca. Do I have a second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Beth seconds the motion. Do I have discussion? Okay, hearing no discussion. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say nay. Okay, that motion carries 5-0 to start the school year fully remote. We will make every effort to have some small group sessions with students and teachers if possible. And we will revisit the potential to change the situation for January 15th, and we'll make that decision by December 15th. Is that clear? And we'll work, Dr. Welch will work with the students that you see fit on meeting their needs in person.
Very much.
Okay. That was a very worthwhile discussion, certainly worth the 2 meetings. I want to just acknowledge all of the staff members and our health professionals that have put endless hours in to provide us with the information needed to make a decision. I am comfortable with the decision, and it appears that we all are. And it took all of that discussion to at least get me there. So I'm thankful for everybody and their time, and look forward to a new challenge of a new school year. So, Heather, or I'm sorry, Sarah, you wanted to talk about the professional development?
Yeah, I just wanted to check in on PD so I had a fuller understanding of what's being offered during those 10 days. I guess the first question is, we have a series of courses that are being offered.
Yes.
Is that up for teachers to opt into, or are administrators working to say these educators should be placed into this course and these educators should be placed into this course? How is that working in terms of the selection process?
So the self-paced courses this summer?
Like this long list here that we're looking at that you have pulled up.
So right now, this is pretty much people are choosing what they would like to take over the summer. We had an MOU with ELEA, so folks are able to earn internal graduate credits, if you will, for PDP hours. So at this point, I have 50 people signed up just for the UDL class. I have 80 people signed up for the Look Deeper race. And then in addition to that, I have 114 people signed up for these various courses. And quite a few are really focusing in on the distance learning tools, the remote learning tools. Everything in here is aligned to either remote learning or our goals, our SMART goals.
So then how do these professional development courses, are these courses being offered as well during the 10 days? Or I guess what's the plan for the 10 days and how does it differ from these courses?
Okay, so for the 10 days, we have to balance time to give them time to plan as well as, the tools that they need. So in the works right now, and we're still figuring this all out, but I want to provide remote learning tools. The plan was to have some that everybody learns about, because there's certain things like Clever and NetTalk that it's across the board, and then more specific tools for specific grades. In addition, there'll be PD opportunities, and again, this is all still in draft, but with Edgenuity, with Alberta.io, because our 6th to 12th grade will be using that, as well as iReady. iReady now has, as you probably know, but I'm saying this because not everyone knows, some really great new reports to kind of figure out where, to help us with identifying learning gaps and prerequisite skills. So I want folks to be able to utilize those reports. And we're also going to talk about, how to give the diagnostic at home, utilizing some of the tools like NetTop that allows us to freeze the screen and monitor what kids are doing so that we can, check in and things like that. So, a lot of these things that are going to be very new. And I'm hoping that a lot of the folks that are doing these courses over the summer, some folks have already explored these and are really experts. So I want to utilize folks and do some of what we normally do with paying staff to lead some of these workshops, because they really have become experts in a lot of these tools. And so it'd be great to build capacity and share have a knowledge share.
So would there be additional teacher choice in that, or are some of these is the district planning to say that some of these professional developments are going to be mandated for certain educators based on either them not taking it in the past, or what is going to be required of them moving forward, or based on it being a new program for the district in general?
Right. So some of these things are going to be specific for certain grade levels, and the expectation would be that we would all be there so we can all be on the same page.
And then is there an expectation regarding where educators would be during professional development? Or is that also going to be part of the conversation with the union? Like, would educators be in the building so that they're able to utilize their materials as they need them while they're planning with other teachers or engaging in one of the professional development sessions?
Quite frankly, all of the vendors are providing this remotely and virtually. They don't want to be in the building. So, it's not like they're missing out on that person. They will be virtual. And the PD is designed to be virtual. So that's still up in the air as to where people will be.
But as we plan out those 10 days, obviously there are going to be many components where we'll need people in the building so we can go over new processes and procedures and so forth. But as you said, Mrs. Trulio, that's going to be continuing in our discussions so that we can iron this all out, and everybody will be very aware of what the expectation is, what the need is, and the direction we're going.
And then has there been a way worked out by which we are able to gather like attendance records, since they are being held remotely and with multiple vendors at play here? Are we gathering attendance records from who is actually signing up and then attending the actual virtual sessions, that we're keeping that log as well for principals?
We need to keep that log anyway for PDPs. And so, yes, we can take attendance. And the nice feature of Google Meet, one of the add-ons that I'm going to be showing everyone, is it actually automatically takes attendance as long as people are logged in through the district, and we can have a record of it. But either way, even if it's a Zoom, I'll be attending all of these to make sure that people get credit for attending and the PDPs that they're earning.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments this evening? Gordon, we're going to message out to East Long Meadow families soon?
Yes, so certainly we will message it out. One of the things that we have to do now is we have to put together a full plan in terms of what we're reporting to both the department, but also as part of that plan is our messaging out to families. So it'll be both, here's the overall district plan, message that out to families, and then schools now will be able to start to get their messaging out because they now know what direction we're going.
They're going to think about, the millions of forms that we get at the beginning of the year. I don't know if they plan on handing those out that first day or not, but should those maybe be made available also online, because half of them aren't going to bring them in the first time around? Just a thought,
Yeah, I
like
mean, I
when you
think-
guys are doing that, especially for like free and reduced, things like that.
Yeah, I think we have a number of forms that we've started to put on the webpage, but to your point, if we're fully remote, obviously we're going to have to increase that.
Part of our equity work too is being able to quickly translate any forms. So that's part of the work that we're working towards anyways, automating these.
Okay, and maybe making sure the Meadowbrook kids get an email address might be easier, because I know sometimes if, you know, your feed for all the little meetings that are happening, they come fast and furious. I didn't know if that might be a thought. They're going to need them eventually. I don't know. I don't know if they're necessary.
That's been a discussion with IT, and actually they do have email addresses. It's just an issue of accessing it the way that we traditionally do, as opposed to with their badges. The clever badges allow them to just kind of flash them, but they do have that. So we're figuring
Okay, I wasn't sure.
The other side.
Okay. Because I'm assuming it's the parents that are getting these messages. I mean, obviously.
Correct. So that's why we are prioritizing Blooms for K-2, because it allows us to directly communicate with parents without them having to log into their student's account.
Okay.
And then 3rd grade and up will have Google Classroom, but the 3rd through 5th grade will also be using Blooms, because you still need that parent communication piece. And then obviously you need parent communication everywhere, but the 6th through 12th grade have the parent portals through our online gradebook. So there'll be that student-facing component, as well as, you know, families. And we've really been doing a lot of work this summer to make sure things are streamlined, because we heard that feedback about, you know, too many platforms and blah, blah, blah. So we have the standardized platforms, but we have the kids being able to use Google Classroom for their assignments. And we have the ability to actually invite parents and guardians so they can get summaries. But then for 3 to 5 at least, they'll be utilizing Blooms to communicate directly with parents. And 6 to 12, we can utilize email and the portals to communicate with parents and families. And then K-2, Blooms just announced an assignment feature. So the parents will also be able to access those assignments, which is not something Blooms allowed for before. So I think we'll be in good shape in terms of covering our bases with communication and also keeping it streamlined.
Thank you.
Sounds like a plan.
I have other questions. I just don't know what they are yet. So there'll be a lot. I'm in my head. I'm just, as far as getting, I know that you had talked about utilizing paraprofessionals and other staff members that maybe aren't normally, you know, working directly with kids. I just know from my own experience that there's a lot of students that do need that pull out from somebody else that will be there. And I hope that everybody is utilized there. I hope that if teachers are finding they're having trouble with their little cohort of kids doing what they're supposed to be doing, that, you know, we utilize reaching out to the parents. I know that some of our administrators have actually gone to people's driveways and said, come on, you need to get online. I know there's a lot of that stuff, but I do hope that you utilize as well as possible any of our staff that we have. Now is not the time to say we don't need you, because if any teacher can break apart and say, could you take these 3 students and work with them is a glorious thing. So, you know, and I know you guys will come, I know you'll do it, but it's just, you know, I'm just going to want to have updates as we move along.
It's all hands on deck at this point.
Okay.
Okay, and we are in good hands. We certainly vetted this whole process and have total faith in the staff to do well by our students. So I think we've come to a good place. And if everybody is happy, we will wrap up the meeting. We all set?
We're good.
Okay. So again, just worth reiterating for all those who have participated in the discussion this evening, thank you. And now we move on to the next phase and get ready for our remote reopening. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion's been made by Bill,
I'll second.
seconded by Beth. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. And that carries 5-0. Thank you all and good night.
Thank you,
Good
everybody.
night.
Thank
Take
you.
care.